Hello, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and joining me, the Minnesota Vikings beat reporter for the Pioneer Press. Not splitting duties anymore, not hockey anymore. Well, sometimes every once in a while they send you over there, but Minnesota Vikings beat is now yours, Dane Mizutani, and my favorite person to play golf with. What is up, Dane? How are you?
Not too much. I'm doing good. I'm still trying to figure out, how to fill in and follow in the footsteps of Chris Thomason. Not sure I'll ever live up, but we're trying our best. Um, Big shoes to fill, big air monarchs to fill.
There is absolutely no filling those shoes. You know that, and so does everybody else. There are some suggestions I could make, but I'll just talk about those when we're golfing. But I think the first step though is when there's breaking news, you have to call at least 13 former Vikings, which was Chris's style. So have you gotten Chuck Foreman's take yet on Dalvin Cook being released?
Have not called Chuck Foreman. Have not called Robert Smith. Have not called Adrian Peterson's father. I haven't. I'm dropping the ball. I think our readers at the Pioneer Press expect a certain level of coverage, and I'm not bringing it right now. So
I mean,
I
you
think we're
got
gonna have to change the way that that we cover breaking news a little bit.
Barry Word. You could talk to Terry Allen. You could go Meweldy Moore. I mean, there's all sorts of guys that
Ontario Smith.
well, yeah, maybe if he's going to pick up his phone, and as long as you don't ask him about anything controversial from his time. But anyway, I'd like to get your reaction though to Dalvin Cook being released because I think that there is a debate to be had of how rebuildy this is. So let's just say that you had a meter that was like those air quality meters that we're all seeing now on our phones. That was like blue is not rebuilding at all. Blue is Kansas City. You're trying to win the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And yellow is like mostly trying to win, but maybe still taking a little bit of a long term outlook. In the orange is you are really taking more of a long term. And in the red would be like what Chicago did last year. You are actively trying to lose. Where would you put the Vikings in the rebuild meter? Folks, I've been wearing Oakley's now for a few weeks, and let me tell you, there is a reason that Justin Jefferson and a bunch of other football players wear these things because they are awesome. I've got the matte black Prism Sapphire polar sunglasses on, and I've been doing all sorts of summer things with them. I've been hitting golf balls in the water, jogging, playing basketball, getting sunburned, but my eyes are in good shape. I have been missing out on this experience for a long time. They are so comfortable. I can wear them all day and never get tired of having them on. Oakley is changing the game, and it's time for you to discover a whole new world of possibilities with your eyewear. They are suited for everyday eyewear with frames and lenses, allowing you to be an extension of yourself, an expression of your personality more than meets the eye. So make a sunglasses upgrade now at Oakley.com. Oakley offers prism lens technology. What the heck is that, you ask? Well, I'm looking through it right now. It is a proprietary technology to Oakley and available for everyday settings as well. If you want to know more, and I know you do, go to Oakley.com and do your own research. And while you're at it, get yourself a pair of everyday glasses that will be sure to change your look for the better. When you wear Oakley, there really is more than meets the eye. Try it for yourself. I've worn sunglasses in the past, and I can assure you that Oakley is the best looking and best quality out there. So go on over to Oakley.com for more information today. Oakley, express your style and build a look that's made for you.
I think not quite in the dark orange, but like not far from it. I don't think they're actively trying to lose, but I think if you read the tea leaves, or not, you don't even have to read them. They're just presented for you right now with what they've done this offseason. I'm not sure how invested they are in winning this year. Like they're gonna say they are. They ran it back with Kirk, so I think that I think you're invested in Kirk, so you're invested in probably not winning a Super Bowl, but probably being a little bit better than horrible. You have Justin Jefferson, so he's gonna like win you games by himself, or with the attention he brings. But you look at what they've done so far this offseason. Adam Thielen, I get it. He was trending downward. Eric Kendricks as well. But those are still NFL players who can produce at least at a level that a NFL player should be able to produce at. Uh, and you look at who's coming up filling those roles. I don't know. Like Brian Asamoah sounds cool, and he's fast. And can he play middle linebacker for the Vikings? Can Jordan Hicks play middle linebacker without Eric Kendricks helping him along? Like these are all the things I think about. Like Jordan Addison, obviously they brought him in to fill the Adam Thielen role. He hasn't practiced throughout OTAs. Doesn't sound like we're going to see him until rookie mini camp or until training camp. Is he good? I don't know. Is he going to be healthy? I don't know. KJ Osborne's, I like KJ, but he's fine, right? Like I think he is a good pass catcher alongside of Justin Jefferson. But what I'm saying is basically like, I think it's closer into the dark orange because I don't know how good this team's going to be next year. And I think last year, obviously the 11-0 and 1-score games during the regular season, like you're going to have some regression at some point because you're just not going to be perfect in all those scenarios. So just, I know this isn't how it works, but just turn 3 of those wins into losses. Then you're 10-7, right? And if the team was 10-7 last year, snuck into the playoffs, lost in the first round, and they did every single thing they've done this offseason, I would be like, they're going to win 6 games. They might win 5 games, right? Because you're going from a 10-win team at that point, and taking away a lot of talent, a lot of experience, and replacing it with unknown commodities and no experience. So I understand that's not how it works. They won the games, so they get to call themselves 13-4 and losing to the Giants in the first round. But I'm just saying, a lot of the ways they won games last year, they were punching above their weight class. If you took away those wins, just because some of them were just unfathomably insane, and you did everything you did so far this offseason, we would be seriously considering, like, are they going to be under 500? So, yeah, I think it's close to dark orange, maybe closer than people would want to say.
Yeah, and I think that there's then the other discussion is whether you want that or not, or whether you like that or not, or think that it's right.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that it's exactly what you should do. I think the reason you hire someone with Quasiodoflements' background is to see through the 13 win total to what they really are. I mean, if you want, like, I know people were upset with Football Outsiders and Aaron Schatz last year because he kept putting out content saying like, this isn't for real. This isn't for real. All of my numbers say that. And then what did it turn out to be? It turned out to be in the playoffs, not for real. And I think you want Quasiodoflements to understand that everything that Football Outsiders understands and everything that PFF understands and all the data to be able to project what they would be with and without those players. And I think if you ran back Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook on the offensive side and Kendricks, and we'll see on Hunter, but za'darius Smith and Delvin Tomlinson, what is the difference in results you're going to get? Are you going to get better results than you got last year? And I don't even just mean wins. I mean like a better point differential, or, you don't have to win all those 1-score games. And the answer for me is probably not, because one thing you can't control is your schedule. So even if you brought back all those guys, and then there's the regression of those guys as they get older. I mean, it's not insignificant. And sometimes I feel like it's almost treated that way, that like, since we knew that they were going to do some of this, like, oh, well, they're moving on from Thielen, but Addison will step right in. Like, okay, well, I guess we'll see. That might not be the case right away. Or they're moving on from Delvin, but he didn't have great rushing yards over expected, so these other guys will be great. Like, I don't know. I want to find out, though, and I think it's very smart of them to treat this not like they won 13 games and they're trying to get back to that, but almost like at the end of 2019, they won a playoff game, and then they acted like they needed to do that again and made moves to do that again, and then missed the playoffs. So they're acting like you're kind of going back in time and changing that, the way that they approach that, to be smarter. I think that's the exact right way to go. I could definitely see other arguments to that, though. I don't know if you have other arguments to that, because I've been kind of advocating this for a long time. So when it happens, it's just like drafting Jordan Addison, where I wanted them to draft a receiver for so long. When they do it, it's like, great move. Is it a great move? I guess we'll find out. But is there some other argument? Are you feeling any differently from what I just said?
No. And I'm not feeling any differently. Obviously, I think we were on the same page about Kirk Cousins, just as far as like your ceiling with him. I will say, like, in a way, like, he's proved me wrong a little bit. Like, I just kind of thought he wasn't a very good quarterback, like, early in his tenure with the Vikings. He's an above average quarterback. Like, if you just lopped off the, top 15 quarterbacks in the league, top 12, he's right in that area. My argument with him is he takes up so much of your salary cap space, and for a return on investment that's not necessarily Super Bowl worthy, and that should be the goal, right? Everyone here should be trying to. It's like in the NBA when Golden State was on their dynastic run, and everyone started building their teams in the ilk of like, how the hell do we beat Golden State, right? You should be trying to build your team with like, how do we beat Kansas City, or how are we going to even compete with them? Because if you're a Vikings fan, if you're a diehard Vikings fan, you look at it honestly. You went 13-4 last year, and you had no chance of beating Kansas City if you were to meet them in the Super Bowl, right? Like, it started to feel like, oh, team of destiny, and then you watch the games and you're like, there's just no way they could have beat Kansas City. So long-windedly, like, yeah, I'm more on your side, where like, I think in a lot of ways Kirk has been what you signed him to be. Like, I don't think he ever lied and said he was like going to be a top 3 quarterback in the league. Like, that was a move at the time. They thought, okay, we did well with Case Keenum, we need to upgrade, and he was the only player he was the best player available that offered an upgrade. But I think this is running its course right now, and you're seeing what the ceiling is. And I think, to your point about Quasi, like, he understands what the ceiling is, and he can see it kind of through more of like a different prism, as someone like, a real football guy who's like, oh man, we just need to add, you know, a couple grinders and we're going to be all right. Like, I think he understands last year was a bit of a statistical anomaly, and understands like, long term, what's the most important position on the field? Quarterback. Do we have a guy who takes us over the top and can make up for certain deficiencies elsewhere? Because the Vikings have a lot of them. No, I don't think he does. And we saw it last. Quasi said the quiet part out loud last year, and he got crushed for it. But he wasn't wrong. He was wrong that he said it. But no, they don't have a Patrick Mahomes. They don't have a Tom Brady. So I think the search is like, you go find one. And if you don't end up with a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady, likely you won't. At least you have a guy on a rookie contract where you can build the team, and fill in holes elsewhere. Because right now, aside from Kirk Cousins, the ceiling you have with them, your ceiling is limited not only because he's your quarterback, but because he's taking up so much of your salary cap.
The funny thing about, there's a few things that you said there that I want to touch on. I mean, the funny thing about the USA Today comments that he made about Kirk being a good quarterback, and you usually win great quarterbacks, is number one, Mahomes won the Super Bowl. So he's right. He's right. just dead right. The other part is that nationally you had people going, what is Quasi saying? And locally it was like, oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, because we've seen this happen over and over again. And the funny thing about a ranking of quarterbacks is when you say that someone is the 12th best quarterback in the league, or the 8th or the 9th or something, you sort of almost think that there's even standard deviations between each of those gaps. So there's a gap between number 1 and number 2 and number 3 and number 4, and it's equal down to number 12. But it's really more like number 1 through 5, and then this huge amount of gap, and then number 6, 7, whatever. And the difference between number 12 and number 20 is way different than the difference between number 1 and number 12. The NBA is this way as well. Peak LeBron and the 12th best NBA player are nowhere near each other, right? But yet, the 20th best NBA player is probably close to the 12th best NBA player. And we think of offenses this way too. Well, they were the 8th best offense, right? But they were 100 points behind the best offense. And that is like 4 games worth of scoring that they didn't do versus the best teams. And you also look who's in the Super Bowl. It's always the best teams that are scoring. And so, I think that, but of course, last year's defense was an atrocity, no doubt. But how else were you going to do this? Another thing I thought of is that Quasiodoflements seems to have wanted to do everything at his price or not do it at all. And this is another approach that I respect. And it's like Delvin Tomlinson. he went to the combine and said, we want Dalvin Tomlinson back in the worst way. And then Cleveland came in with a lot of money and they were like, well, have a good time by the lake, just, and that seemed to go for everything, that Dalvin Cook would not take the, pay cut that it seems like they wanted him to take. So they're like, okay. Patrick Peterson wouldn't take the pay that they wanted to give him. So they were like, okay. And they were it's almost like they went into the offseason with this idea that they would bring it back, but it was only if it wasn't going to hurt them in the future. And it was only at their price, but their price was way too low. And they probably knew that for all of those guys, including Dalvin Cook. And that's kind of how we ended up here. How else would you want him to do it though? Because if he starts spending, and I feel like they did this with Rudolph, they did this with Cook in the initial deal, where it's like, if you're constantly spending exactly what the player got. And I remember writing an article about this, like they overspent for every single move they did, whether it was trades or whether it was signings, everyone got the highest price. I don't think you want your GM to operate that way, especially if you don't feel like, hey, this year's our year and you're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, I don't think you do. And I think like the idea that the salary cap's a myth is a myth. Like it is like at some point the chickens come home to roost. And we saw that with Dalvin Cook set to eat up $14 million of your cap space. Like it looks cool when you do like, oh, the extension, we restructured the contract. So we only have to, Dalvin Cook's only taking up $4 million of our cap space. Well, like in 3 years, you see what happens. He takes up $14 million of your cap space. So yeah, to your point about, previous, the front office, like the way that they kind of team build was just like, we're close. We just need to keep kicking the can down the road and it's all going to work out for us. And you're starting to see with Kwesi, like it seemed like last year he was just kind of like content to just see what he had. And now he sees what he has. He can kind of understand like through his eyes, not just from like an outsider's perspective watching the Vikings, but like as the guy in charge of running the Vikings, like I think he has a better understanding of like what is in the building. And while like it's been weird to watch him cut bait with like faces of the franchise, like Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks, Dalvin Cook, I don't have a ton of issue with anything he's really done this offseason if you're just talking about trying to set up a long-term winner. Now, Danielle Hunter might be a different thing. Like if they trade him and they don't get like a haul in return, or they're unable to kind of figure out a way to get him under contract long-term, then I'm starting to think, okay, like if you can't hold on to Danielle Hunter, that might be the first move that kind of sounds a little bit of an alarm. Like, what's going on here? What are you doing? On the flip side of that, though, I do see like you don't want to give just a ton of money to a 28-year-old who's had 2 serious injuries in his time. And while he closed strong last year, and I think he was top 10 in pressure rate, like, there's reason to believe that like the decline of Danielle Hunter might come quicker than maybe the end of the contract. So the Danielle Hunter one is something I'm obviously keeping an eye on. Like Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, like they're going to get signed. And then they've been really clear about that. Like Kwesi, talk to anyone in the building and it's pretty clear they're going to figure something else out. Like the fact that he's prioritized what he's prioritized this offseason, the front office as a whole, but obviously led by Kwesi, I kind of think they know what they're doing. Like I honestly, like, does anyone know what they're doing? Do we know if any, like, but at the end of the day, like it's hard for me to, like, from a like 30,000 foot perspective, like really, look down on any of these moves right now, because I think at the end of the day, it helps them long-term, even if it might hurt them short-term as far as producing a winner.
I think the complicating factor remains Kirk Cousins, that he's still here for one, because you're going to win games with him here because, as you mentioned, he's a very good quarterback and there's clearly a floor that he gives you. And we saw that in 2020. That was a bad football team and still got them in the hunt at the end of the day, 7 wins at the end of the day. And so it won't be worse than that, more likely than not. It would have to really go horrifically for Cousins. And I think that him and his relationship with O'Connell, their pass first offense, I mean, there is a floor to what this team should be, and it's probably 7 or 8 wins. So, I think that makes things a little more tricky to call it like the full rebuild or put it in the red of a rebuild when you still have him as your
Right.
quarterback. But then you're also asking the question, so what kind of comes next at the most important position? And you mentioned drafting a quarterback next year. That seems the most obvious. The restructure is a weird kind of sore thumb in this thing because it creates such a massive cap hit for next year. But if you're Kirk and you're looking around, and he's a pretty, I think, knowledgeable guy about football, and he knows what's going on, and he's seeing Thielen go and Cook go and Hunter and everything else. He can't be thinking, "Oh yeah, this is right on the cusp of being the next Super Bowl team." And seeing some of the desperation for moves from teams this year, how much the Jets had to give up to get Aaron Rodgers or Jimmy Garoppolo going to the Raiders. There's always going to be teams, Derek Carr to the Saints. There's always going to be teams that are a quarterback away or something like that. That might not come to fruition this year, but it did kind of remind me a little bit of the Eagles when they went from Sam Bradford to Carson Wentz. I know the Vikings don't have their Carson Wentz right now, but they had Sam Bradford going into that season, and they were just like, nah, we're good. We're rebuilding this thing. We're going to play Wentz instead. I don't know if they would make a move in the middle of June. Clearly, though, they're not afraid to be making moves in late May and
Yeah.
June. They don't have a timeline here. I just wonder where you think that Kirk sort of fits in this entire equation.
I think he fits in just like he's in the building, and I don't think like they got if Quasi would have gotten an offer from say like the Niners that he really liked, um, maybe Trey Lance is involved, maybe he's not. Like I don't think Quasi's necessarily like afraid of being bad for a couple of years, or I think he has some good job security. I think the 13-4 record helped with that. The only thing I would kind of caution against being like really bad is like you don't want to piss off Justin Jefferson, and he has kind of a finite amount of years, but he's 23 and he's not even in his prime yet. Like if you just tell him like chill, we're gonna get you a quarterback, we're gonna try our best to get you Caleb Williams, whatever. I think Kirk fits into the equation in the sense that like they didn't get what like a big enough return on investment or like a big enough like offer to make trading him make sense, and now he's just around. I think the most telling part of this offseason is that they didn't restructure, they didn't extend, they didn't give Kirk the term that he wanted and his camp clearly wanted. Just being content to kind of let this thing run out. I don't think he's in the long term. Like I don't think the Vikings are long for Kirk Cousins. So I think if they could have moved off him sooner as in this offseason for something that made sense long term for an asset, a couple picks, maybe a young player, I think Quasi would have seriously considered doing it. But I think because he is there and because he is under contract and because you have restructured a couple of times now, it's just like he's there. He's a lame duck quarterback. He's say what you want about Kirk. He's very content being a lame duck quarterback. He's done it a few times. Talking to us at the beginning of it was right before OTAs or right around the draft. Like he didn't seem like too like miffed with it. Like he's just like whatever. Like I've done this before. So I think he just fits into this year's equation because he's there. And if say I don't know, say someone blows their knee out in training camp and the team is willing to give them a first round pick for Kirk Cousins, I think Quasi would do it. I don't think he's long for Kirk Cousins. I think he's kind of proved that with the comments he's made on him throughout the years, since he's taken over, but also with just like obviously not giving him the long term extension that he wants. So I don't think he's part of the equation long term. I think in a couple of years here, you'll be like, hey, remember that year that they, let Adam Thielen go, then let Eric Kendricks go, then released Dalvin Cook around training camp, and then like the next year, like Kirk Cousins wasn't even the quarterback anymore. And I think we're gonna remember that. Like he'll be a part of this like changing of the guard. Just like not right now.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing because, I mean, two things about Kirk. I mean, number one is that the things are so unclear with the NFC North that you could actually mess around and still win it. I know,
Ye-
I know for some people they want the top quarterback, but you're unlikely to be in the Caleb Williams conversation anyway. But
Yeah,
the Lions are one Lionsy thing away from happening. Maybe half the team gets suspended for gambling or something.
gambling.
It could happen, or just Jordan Love not being good, or Justin Fields taking no steps forward. And these are very realistic things on all fronts, that the Vikings could still be the most competent team. Maybe Brian Flores is a little better. Maybe these young players are a little faster. And even if they make some
Hmm.
mistakes, they make more plays as well than they did last year. And this aggressive defense works. Like, I don't think that this team has to at all be bad and could still be right there. And the other part of it too is that you get to evaluate everybody. So you get to see if Jordan Addison can play. If you put Nick Mullins in there, and I respect him as a backup quarterback, or Jaron Hall, then you'd be completely lost probably if you threw a rookie into this situation. Can you even evaluate Jordan
Yeah.
Addison? And I mean, you mentioned Justin Jefferson. I personally think Justin Jefferson only really cares that much about winning. But at the same time, if he had a backup quarterback who couldn't get him the football and gave his team no chance to win, that would be a completely miserable experience for him. I still think he signs an extension this year, and it's going to be a short-term extension, and so he'll have a couple years to see where this thing is going to go and get all the money in his pocket that he deserves. But I think that you don't want him fuming mad, even if there are some benefits to losing. But I was just looking at early career Atlanta for Matt Ryan and how he came into the league and they won a bunch of games, but they had a dip of a couple of years in a row where they took a step back and they came out of that and ended up in the Super Bowl, and he ended up with an MVP. Now that can't happen with Kirk's age. Like, you don't have time for that. But
Hmm.
it's just the point that you can kind of find a lot of franchises, and that was with Julio Jones, some of that. You could find a lot of franchises that have these dips and then come out of them. I mean, even Green Bay with late Rodgers, like they fire McCarthy and then LaFleur comes in and kind of takes them back up on the upswing. So these ups and downs are kind of always happening, but they don't feel very good for anyone in the moment, right? And then that's what I was going to ask you, is like, what is this year going to be? Right, like, what is the crowd going to be? What is the feeling going to be? Because last year, I think everybody knew when they brought back Peterson, and they kind of kept the whole roster together. Everybody knew, like, they're here to win, and let's see if this new coach can win, and he could, but
Hmm.
in crazy fashion. But those wins, you don't have to give them back. So the crowd and the fans, I think, were really behind what they were doing. But this year, when Kirk runs out there and it's like Kirk Cousins, and they're like, well, yeah, okay, all right, I guess he's still the quarterback. Like, I don't know. It just feels all kind of like this weird. I don't want to call it purgatory, because purgatory is where you try to win and you win 7 games instead. So they're moving in a direction, but I think it's a very strange year. I've been saying transition, but I guess I just wonder how people are going to feel about this.
Yeah, I think that'll obviously be dictated by like the first 4 games of the season, right? Like the Bucks game should be a win in the season opener, but it could be a loss. And if it's a loss, and then all of a sudden you lose to the Eagles, and then you lose to the Chargers, and then you're 0-3 going into the Panthers game, like I don't think it'll take very like apathy is probably not the right word, because football is king and it will always be, and people will just care like always. But I think you'll get a really restless fan base, and I think the magic of last year, it was just like I didn't expect them to be that good, but every week they kind of just latched you, like hooked you even more, and like I started to fall for it. Like I was like, okay, like are they good? Like I don't think they're good, but like they're kind of good. Like could they win a Super Bowl? Like I don't think so, but maybe. I don't think you're gonna feel that this year. I think your point about the schedule is a good one. Like it's just a harder schedule. It's a first place schedule now, so you have to play those teams. That's not going to be easy. But yeah, I think transition year is probably a good way to phrase it, uh, because it's not a full rebuild, right? Like it isn't like Bears rebuild last year, be the worst team in the league. Let's just trot out like a not NFL roster. But it's not a rebuild. They didn't try and improve on the team last year, so I think there will be frustration from the fan base at some point. And I think it's all about how that's sold. not necessarily. I don't think Quasi's going to ever come out and be like, I'm going to take you on a weird rabbit hole. There was a weird, like New York Rangers, because I used to be a hockey guy. They wrote in, like, I remember when they did it. I think it was Jeff Gordon, their former GM. He wrote like a letter to the fans, and the social media team tweeted it out and was like, "We're gonna rebuild." And it was like middle of the season, and they're like, "We're gonna get bad. Just a heads up. Like we're not as good as we want to be. We're gonna get bad." Like I don't think, and then it worked. Like they got, like they're New York, so they attracted free agencies. They got Capo Caco and turned it into whatever. Now they're one of the better teams in the East. I don't think it'll be something where Quasi's writing Vikings fans like an email to post out on the Vikings social media page. But I think there will be frustration from fans this year being like, what are we doing? Or like, why are we not as good as we were last year? And I think those fans, some fans will understand that, like, okay, last year really was like an aberration. Some fans will just, you know how it is. They'll just be like, oh, let's fire everyone, because that's just how it goes in the NFL. But I think if people are able to take a step back this year, because again, like I keep saying, I don't expect them to be as good this year. I think you'll understand, like, maybe there's a longer term goal in mind, and you'll be able to kind of start to see a year or two down the road. It's hard to do that right now. It's May or it's June. It's so, like, no one is looking at 2024 right now because you're barely looking at 2023. But I think midway through 2023, if you're frustrated with this team, you're going to probably at least be able to see, like, okay, well, if I'm a fan, I can say, like, we have Justin Jefferson under contract. Presumably it'll get done by then. TJ Hawkinson under contract. I'll assume it's going to get done at some point. All of these pieces, and then a ton of cap space next year. And then maybe the potential to draft a quarterback. I think fans are going to be frustrated this year, but I think over time they're going to be able to see kind of the longer vision in mind.
So I just want to say that, you know how every team has their like phrase or saying or whatever it's called, their jingle for the year. So the Twins that one year did, "This is how we baseball." And of course they got roasted for it. Yeah, that's not great. But yours, or for this year, or they should take this from you. It's not a rebuild is what they should, like. This is, wear the shirts. It's not a rebuild. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that. That's going to be the headline for this podcast, is it's not a rebuild, because I think that's exactly the way to put it, is that, because what it's really not is it's not a tank. Like, there is a difference. And I wrote this, and I think that that's what we need to understand, is there's not tanking or Super Bowl. Now people talk about those places you want to be, but you don't have to be there. I mean, that's Philadelphia 2020 did not tank, but they rebuilt, and they took that year to step back. And I think that there are similarities, and you could probably find a bunch of teams that had the same thing, where there was a step back year that was not a tank, but it was all right, we're going to have to deal with some things with the salary cap, which, as you said, no one knows how real that thing is more than the Minnesota Vikings. And they do everything they can to manipulate it most of the time. But this year they really haven't. And it's like almost refreshing. It's like, oh, they're not messing with the cap and ruining their future. And they're not June 1sting everybody that they can. And they're not pushing money down the future and everything else. But I think that that's really a smart way to put it. And, that happened when I was in Buffalo, where their general manager, after they traded away some guys who were a big part of what they were doing, Thomas Vanek, Jason Pominville, Minnesota fans would know these guys. And their GM came out and said there's going to be some suffering. So then when he said suffering, everybody latched onto that. And I will say, though, I want to give fans credit for understanding these things much, much better than maybe they ever could before. I think that baseball kind of changed the way everybody looks at this. I also think that fans are just super informed, and they pay such close attention to their team that they get it. That I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of fire O'Connell. What is he doing? I think on game day there will, and you'll see it on social media, and it will kind of twist how we feel about it, that, there will be a lot of criticism, because it's not fun to watch a team struggle. And it certainly wasn't fun to watch the 27th best defense last year. And if it's that bad again, because there's all these young players, there will be times where it's not all that entertaining to watch. I am constantly amazed, though, how the Vikings, no matter if it's a 7-win or a 13-win season, every game is close anyway. So I still do, and that, I guess we can sort of end on this. I still do expect it to be an entertaining football team and a very interesting football team. It actually might be, well, last year was interesting because of O'Connell. But as far as the roster goes, we weren't learning anything new about any players last year. We knew who Patrick Peterson was. We knew who Dalvin Tomlinson was, everybody else. This year, I have not covered the team in a place where I needed to learn a whole lot about people since I moved here and then had to, learn if it was Eric with a K or C for Eric Kendricks, right? I mean, it really has been the same guys so much that there has been a lack of this type of intrigue that a roster refresh brings along. So I think it's the most interesting training camp in kind of a long time from a roster perspective.
I agree with that 100%. It was for the better part of the last decade, it was who's going to be at middle linebacker. It's Eric Kendricks. Adam Thielen's going to be a receiver. So-and-so is going to play corner. Obviously, the last couple of years, it's been Patrick Peterson. I don't know who's going to play corner this year besides Byron Murphy. I don't know who's going to play middle linebacker this year. I don't know who's going to be I would assume at some point Jordan Addison's going to be healthy. If he's not, I don't know who the third receiver is because outside of KJ Osborne, maybe it's Jalen Naylor. He's been playing well throughout OTA. I think it'll be a fun training camp for fans who come to TCO Performance Center in the baking sun and watch it in the bleachers to just pick a guy, right? I used to do this when I don't watch baseball anymore, Coller. But when I used to watch baseball and I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, I would pick random players to latch on to. This was when they were pretty good. It was before they got, the Chris Bryants, the Rizzos and all that. I used to love a guy named Ryan Theriot because he was just a random shortstop. And I was like, yeah, I don't want my favorite player to be the best player on the team. I'm just going to pick this guy. Really latched onto a guy named Ryan Theriot. Everyone can find their Ryan Theriot this year at training camp because, just pick a guy. You want to pick Jalen Naylor as your guy that you're going to follow if you're a fan this year, and he's going to be your guy that you latch onto at receiver. He might play this year. He might play. He might score a few touchdowns this year. He might get loose, and he's got speed. He might be out in the open. You want to pick? I don't know. Who else do we have? Nick Muse, if you want to just pick a tight end, okay, not TJ Hawkinson, not Josh Oliver, Nick Muse might get some snaps this year. You can pick any of the corners because, I said, we don't know who's going to play there. It's just going to be a fun team to follow in the sense that we don't know a lot about them yet, and you're going to learn a lot about these players. That's partially our job, right? If, say, Josh Metellus really pops this year, then you're going to learn, if you're a fan and you're following along, who the hell Josh Metellus is and what's his story. We know a lot of these guys' stories, or we had in the past. How many more Adam Thielen features could we have written? How many more Eric Kendricks features could we have written? There's a lot of stories to be written, and from that, a lot of fans can kind of latch on and learn a lot new about this team. So I think that's a really good point. Maybe they're not going to be good, and maybe they will. Maybe they're not going to be as entertaining as last year because they're probably not going to win 11 one-score games and be perfect. But they're going to be entertaining in the sense that it's new, it's different, and sometimes new is just fun.
Was it Ryan Theriot and Mike Fontenot in the middle of that infield for the Cubs? Yeah, what a time to be alive. So, I mean, that's a hell of a pull. Yeah, I feel I'll watch the Twins when they decide to start scoring some runs again, and then maybe I'll check out Target Field this year. But I wanted to say before we wrap up, because I appreciate perspective, a lot of fun to get together and talk about this, but people should follow your work because you are one of the most creative reporters that there is in the Twin Cities. And I mean that, you always find interesting angles, strange things about players, weird hobbies that they have or things that have happened in their past and write really, really interesting stuff about them. So when you said get to know these players, you are a great person to follow. So if people had not followed you on the Wild beat, because they got tired of first round outs there and they'd rather watch first round outs here, they can now follow you. What is it? Is it just Dane Mizutani on Twitter? Is that your Twitter?
Yeah, at Dane Mizutani. So
Okay, there can't be that many of you out there.
Nah,
Other
there's
Dane
not a
Mizutani.
lot of them.
Okay, well, make sure you follow his work at the Pioneer Press because it's going to be good, I promise. And I mean, a bunch of new players at training camp is like a festival for you, so it should be a lot of fun for us to cover and bring people these storylines. So thanks for your time, and we will definitely be doing it on a semi-regular basis.
Can't wait. Yeah, and I can't wait to hit the golf course tomorrow with you and shoot a 120.
Mizutani golf. We'll see how it goes. I've been hitting the range, and it hasn't changed anything, so we'll have some fun though.